Now to a question that still has no clear answer. How did two 20-something young men land a $300 million Pentagon contract?
This is David Packouz. You might have seen the movie War Dogs.
You drove these through the triangle of death.
Yeah, well, it's based on his life, and Miles Teller played him.
Yeah, so the way the movie got made.
In this podcast, we discuss how in less than a year he went from massaging old rich men for money to closing a $300 million private defense contract with the United States Army, and then ultimately losing it all.
David, I just want you to know that the feds just raided the office.
I give and they get, and they run around town beating their chests like they forget. I can forget for now, but I won't never forget. No, love I feel, knowing the universe got my back. Whoa, love I feel, knowing that money gon' come right back.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Journey Podcast. If you are here, please subscribe, like, drop a comment, give us 5 stars, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from. We're in Miami.
How you doing?
Jake.
Let's get it.
Joined by John.
Let's get it.
Very special guest today. You've definitely seen him in the movie War Dogs, played by Miles Teller. And we're very honored to have you here. I mean, we were talking earlier. You're arguably our biggest guest we've ever had.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that,
Yeah, it's
guys.
going to be cool.
Thanks for having me.
Cool.
Yeah,
of course.
thanks for being here. And you were
Yeah.
super cool about it too. You're like you're just a cool guy. You know,
Yeah.
like a lot of people are very.
I should have brought my shades.
There you go. Well, I mean, I figured for this episode, probably just jump right into it. You know,
Sure.
Just
Sure.
get right into the story. You're the first guest we've ever had that we wrote notes for.
Okay,
Which-
wow. I feel
We
honored.
watched the movie twice.
Did your homework.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, we made sure to do our due diligence.
Yeah.
So I guess the first thing we can get into is obviously anyone here, you know, you guys have probably seen the movie and your story is fucking crazy. Did you guys sell the largest private defense contract to the government ever or no?
I think at the time it was the largest small ammunition contract.
Okay.
Ever. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause it was
$300 million.
$300 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
to the U.S. government, guns. You know,
Yeah.
like, it's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And you didn't start there. You started out with probably, I don't know what you started with, but I know in the movie there was massage stuff
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
Then there was the bed sheet business
Yeah.
going on. And I know by the age of 18, you had roughly $100,000 in your bank account.
I was 22.
22.
Yeah, yeah. So there was there's some differences from the movie in real life, but like Efraim and I were not the same age. He was 18, I was 22.
Oh, wow.
when we
So
first-
wow.
you were older
Yeah.
than him.
Yeah, 4 years
cool.
older
So,
than him.
well,
Yeah.
what was it
Yeah.
like meeting him again for the first time after having that little age gap, that gap in between, right? Because you went to, junior high school with him?
We weren't actually in the same school. We went to the same synagogue.
Oh,
So
okay.
our parents went to the same synagogue. So neither of us liked to pray. So we'd like sneak out of prayers and
so he
go
was-
hang out on
he
the
was your
basketball
buddy.
court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you guys separated. I guess he moved.
Yeah, he went to LA to work for his uncle because he
okay.
got kicked out of high school for smoking weed. And I went to Israel to study because my parents were worried that I was becoming less and less religious, and they wanted to brainwash me back into it. So
There you go.
Yeah. So that's how we separated.
And then he came back to Miami.
Yeah.
And you guys linked back up.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that like?
Yeah, so he came back to Miami. He worked for his uncle for like 2 years, and that's where he learned the gun business and how to do government contracting. How to bid on contracts and sell to the government. And I hadn't seen him for a while. Like he came back to Miami and started working on his own, and we didn't link up until after about a year of him working on his own. And at the time I was in university studying chemistry. I was working on the side doing massage therapy, as you mentioned. I also got into importing bed sheets and towels and SD cards as well.
It's crazy.
I had a few different businesses.
Right.
We bumped into each other at a mutual friend's house. We both went over to this friend's house to smoke weed, and and he asked me, what are you doing these days? And I told him, I told him about the bed sheet business and the SD card business. I was importing from China and Pakistan, and I was doing pretty well. As you mentioned, I had about $100,000 saved up at that point, which I thought was pretty hot shit.
Amazing
for
for
a 22-year-old kid.
22-year-old,
Yeah,
it was more money than any of my other friends
Yeah,
had.
absolutely.
So I thought I was pretty hot. I was a pretty hot shot, but so he asked me, what are you doing these days? And I told him about that. And he's like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, a lot of the stuff you're doing in those businesses is kind of the stuff I'm doing too. You know, finding suppliers overseas, arranging logistics, figuring out licensing, financing. And he's like, but I bet I'm making way more money than you, so you should come work with me because I need a partner. And you know, you're obviously a smart guy. I can trust you. We've known each other forever. And I said,
and this is in his first conversation, not first conversation when he discovers what you do for business.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Confidence, huh?
Yeah. I mean, we'd known each other for a long time, but we just lost touch.
Yeah.
So I said to him, well, I mean, are you sure about that? You know, how much money have you made?
Because you're thinking you got the upper hand.
Yeah,
you know you got 100.
He's also 4 years younger than you at this point,
he's
too.
4
So
years
it's like, what are you talking
younger,
about? You're making more money than me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't driving a nice car or anything. You know, he was like
yeah.
living in a little 1-bedroom studio. You know, like I didn't think he was doing that great. You know. And so I'm like, how much money have you made? And he's like, okay, I'm going to tell you, but just to inspire you, not because I'm bragging, all right? And he opens up his computer and he logs into his Bank of America account and he shows me his bank account. And he had $1.8 million in his bank account.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and he was 18 years old.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and my mind was blown. I was like, he'd been working on his own for a single year, and he had almost $2 million in his just sitting in his account.
Yeah,
Liquid.
yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, holy crap, this guy knows something I don't.
Right.
You
So
know?
what is your initial like reading of Efraim, like growing up with him and kind of knowing him? Like, do you have a gut feeling about him? Do you actually trust him? And then when you see that, are you like, even though I might not feel like the best about this guy, I gotta do this because this money's insane? Like, what's
Right.
going through your mind at that standpoint?
So, I mean, when we were growing up, like, he was just like kind of a class clown type of guy, you know, always playing pranks on people, joking around. He's a pretty funny guy, actually. You know, he's jokes around a lot, you know, he makes people laugh. Yeah. I never thought he was like a business genius or anything like that. He didn't really do much during his teen years. But when we met up again, he definitely changed from when we knew each other as kids. He just became obsessed with money. Like, that's all he talked about all day.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'll give you a little story, an example of that. During that time, we had one of the members of our friend group had become addicted to heroin and was very depressed, and we were worried that he was suicidal. And we were talking about it amongst a group of our friends. You know, what should we do about this guy? You know, like, we're all very worried about him. And Efraim, you know, looks at us. He's like, wait a second. Are you telling me that he's addicted to heroin and he's suicidal? Oh, I got the perfect idea. We're going to put a multi-million-dollar life insurance policy on him and send him a bunch of heroin, you know? And we're like,
What?
What are you talking about?
that's exactly what I said.
That's
I'm like, that's where, I mean, he was joking, but only half joking.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
Yeah.
And like, he never actually did it.
Yeah.
But
he would do
but
anything to make a
that's
buck.
where his
But
mind
that's
is.
where his mind went.
Yeah.
That's where his mind went. So like, this is, you know, he never like read any books. He never read, you know, like, rarely ever watched any movies. You know, he was just obsessed with like making money, business, always scheming. You know, everything we talked about always turned to like making money.
Yeah.
And what do you think the difference is, right? Because you're an entrepreneur at that age, and
Yeah.
you have $100,000 in your bank account, and it
Yeah.
seems like you kind of have a healthy relationship with money.
Yeah.
What happens to a guy like that? Like, what do you think happened to him in LA?
Well, I mean, I think that there's definitely healthy amounts of drive and unhealthy, right? And it's a fuzzy line, so you know, there's it's hard to tell exactly where it is, but I would say I think he had a lot to prove, you know, because so when he got kicked out of high school for smoking weed, he went to a private Jewish high school like I did. It was different high schools, but similar. His parents said, "Oh, you know, you're gonna end up on the streets. You're gonna be like a drug addict. You're gonna join a gang. You know,
Yeah.
this is like, they thought like weed is the same as heroin. You know, that's kind of like how the idea of it. I mean, I think the community has become a little bit more worldly these days with the internet and everything, but that's how they thought back then. And so, you know, his parents said, well, you know, if you're not gonna like take the rules seriously, you're going to find out what life is about. You're going to join the workforce. And so that's why they sent him to work for his uncle. His uncle had this big pawn shop in South Central LA, and put him to work in the warehouse, then realized he was a good talker and put him to work as a salesman in the shop. Right. And that's how he got obsessed with guns and learned how to bid on contracts from his uncle. So I think he had like a lot to prove to his family that he's not gonna be, like a good for nothing failure, and his immediate family are like very normal, nice people, but like his grandfather seems to be like who he takes after. So like his grandfather is actually a billionaire.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I think he passed away, but like he was a billionaire, but like one of these like. He's like an Iranian. He immigrated from Iran. He's a slumlord in LA. Owns a whole bunch of like real estate. And his grandfather got infamous because he was married to his grandmother for like 40 something years. They had like 8 kids together. And then like his grandmother decided to divorce his grandfather, and it turned out that his grandfather had never married her legally. Just in synagogue, religiously.
Right.
And so she tried to, all her kids were grown, so she wasn't going to get like child support or anything. So she tried to get some alimony, and he offered her $0.
Wow.
$0. Yeah. And he was a billionaire.
Yeah.
And so she sued him. It was like the largest alimony suit in history. She sued him for like $700 million. I think they ended up settling out of court for some undisclosed amount. I imagine a very, very small percentage of that.
Right.
But she was taken care of, but that's what he tried to do. So his grandfather is like known to be kind of like one of these ruthless business guys, and that's his personality is much more similar.
He kind of took
to
it.
that.
He followed in the footsteps. Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah. So now you're back connected with him.
Yeah.
What is like the first business play you guys are making together? What's that conversation? Is it like it is in the movie when he's doing the accent, pretending to be a general?
Right.
He's done that. I saw him do that. That's actually true. Wow. He would pretend. He would call up. This is one of his tricks that he would use. Is he'd call up his competitors who he knew were bidding on the same contracts he was, and he would pretend to be like the contracting officer in charge of doing the contract, and he'd be like, "Oh, our computer system is down, but like the deadline is about to get passed. Why don't you just give me your price? I'll put it in manually for you, And he would get their prices like that.
That's
wouldn't
amazing.
always work, but sometimes
So
it
he
did.
knew what to beat. He would know what to beat.
Exactly. So he would know to put it slightly under that, and then he would win the deal.
Bid.
Yeah. And the crazy thing for me is that I would see him do that from his cell phone, and he wouldn't like hide his number or anything.
It's crazy.
I was like, just like do like star 69 or star 67, whatever it is. And he's like,
whatever, it is what it is.
He just didn't care.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Didn't care. And the crazy thing is, he never got caught doing it either. So yeah, just mind blowing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you saw this from the beginning too. So you're watching him do like these quote unquote weasel kind of tactics.
Yeah.
What are you thinking? Like at this point when you're watching him do that, because I know in the movie it's not exact, but I think the first scene in the movie where you see him do that, you're not working for him yet. Or working with him yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way it happened in real life is I kind of got the more I worked with him, the more I kind of realized how deep he was going, and what level he was playing at. Like I didn't really realize it in the beginning. I mean they rearrange things in the movie to kind of make things
tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. They have to have that story arc, and
you worked
in an hour and a half or less.
Yeah.
So
you worked as a consultant on the movie too, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
How did that happen? Like
how did the movie happen?
Yeah, I'm just curious because one of the questions that we have is why the movie's perspective is from your perspective and not his. So I'm just very curious too about that.
Yeah. So the way the movie got made was, I'll jump to the end of the story here, but the New York Times published this like long, unflattering article about us.
Oh, man.
Our mugshots were on the front page of the New York Times. It created a big political scandal. And Rolling Stone saw that, and they were like, "This is the coolest story ever." And so they called me up and decided to interview me. They interviewed him also for like a little bit, and then he decided he didn't want to cooperate, wanted to do his own thing. But they so Rolling Stone published this really long article about us, and that got the attention of Todd Phillips, the guy, the director of the Hangover movies. He also directed Joker. Yeah. So War Dogs was his transition from comedy to drama. You know, that's what they call War Dogs a dramedy.
Yeah.
So when I first heard that he optioned the rights of the Rolling Stone article, I thought, I'm like, oh, he's gonna make another Hangover movie. He's gonna show me like waking up, you know, and from a drug-fueled binge in Vegas next to a tiger or something, you know. And I'm like, he's gonna make us look like idiots, you know. So I was like, whatever. So I was actually pretty happy with how the movie came out. It came out, I thought, pretty good.
Yeah,
I thought it was a nice balance of comedy and drama. But when they optioned the Rolling Stone article, they also optioned my life rights, they call it, right? Okay. And they didn't have to do that. Legally, they can make a movie about anyone who's a public figure, and if your name has appeared in the media, you're officially a public figure.
Really?
And and then they can make a movie about you, say anything they want, and not pay you a penny. Right. It doesn't have to be true. It could be anything. Right. Yeah. It's freedom of speech. That's how it goes in the United States. Yeah. Other countries have more strict libel laws. Like the UK has strong libel laws. So you can't do that. But over here, it's pretty lenient. Yeah. So they didn't have to buy my life rights, but because they wanted to make it based on a true story, they wanted it to be a little more realistic. So they wanted my cooperation, and that's why they optioned my life rights. He was in prison at the time. So, and they also knew that he's a pathological liar, so they didn't really want to deal with him. And he's also infamously a very hard person to do business with. And so they didn't want to deal with him. So that they figured they have one guy, they didn't want to deal with him. And they also, another reason they put it from my perspective is because I was like the normal guy. And so they figured the audience would relate more to
100%.
my character
Very
rather than his.
Amazing.
So that's why it was made. Yeah.
And then then once they decide to do that, what are you thinking? Because the first thing I said to you when we were downstairs, like, I mean, holy shit. I mean, you're a guy. Well, that must be the coolest thing ever. You have a whole movie made after you. You know, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it was pretty surreal. Yeah, definitely. I mean, at first, so most movies, most things that get optioned to be made into movies, right, don't eventually get made into movies.
That's a good point, too.
So like the way it works is like, let's say some director sees some article and it's like, I want to make this into a movie. They'll option it, which means they'll give like maybe like somewhere between 10 and 30 grand to whoever they're optioning it to, and they'll be like, okay, we have 3 years to start production on this, and if we don't start production, then you can shop your story to someone else, right? So it's kind of like it's a holding thing. And then if they usually have in the contract that they could re-up that option for another 2 or 3 years for an additional 20-30 grand or whatever. And but most stories that get optioned, the options expire and it just never gets made, right? Most scripts that get written do not enter production. That's just like fact of Hollywood, like probably in the high 90 percentiles. That's how it goes. So the entire time until they actually started production, I was like, are they actually going to do this, And so I didn't have my hopes up too high because the guy who wrote the Rolling Stone article, Guy Lawson, so the way that happened is Guy Lawson is the Rolling Stone writer. He'd written a bunch of other stuff that had been optioned into movies and TV shows, and most of that stuff hadn't actually entered production. So he kind of told me that he's like, don't get your hopes too high, don't be too disappointed. Let's see, where was I? So when they finally actually started doing production on it, I was like, holy crap, this is actually happening. And it was really, really surreal. Like I went to the premiere, and Miles Teller is like on screen, and he's like, "My name is David Packouz, and I'm an international arms dealer." I'm
like holy shit!
That's me. Yeah, it was pretty bizarre.
Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, how was your relationship with Miles Teller throughout it? Like, are you like coaching him? Like, what? Yeah, not at all.
He didn't give a shit. No.
Really?
What?
Yeah, because I feel like actors do that. I feel like he would want to spend some time with you. Maybe like.
So actors do that when the guy they're playing is already famous. Like,
Right.
you know,
Okay.
Jordan
like,
Belfort?
yeah,
Not-
but Jordan,
maybe
a
not
little
really,
bit, but not really.
Yeah.
But like Freddie Mercury, for example.
Okay,
You know,
right,
everyone
right.
knows what Freddie Mercury looks like, talks like,
Yeah.
sings like, you know.
Right,
So, you know, he had to like look like him, talk like him, you know, like he had to
Be the character.
Be
Yeah,
the
yeah,
character.
yeah.
Same with Hunter S. Thompson, you know, these are personalities that are already known to the public. Nobody knew who I was.
Right.
So they didn't really care. You know, that's why I have great hair in the movie.
That's great.
You know,
That's great.
so you know they really didn't care. They didn't care what I looked like. They didn't care. You know, they wanted to tell a story, and that was it. You know, so they didn't really. He didn't do a character study on me. Jonah Hill didn't do a character study on.
That's what I was
Ephraim
going to
either.
ask.
No.
From your perspective, did Jonah do a good job being Efraim?
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
that laugh actually Ephraim's laugh?
That is not Ephraim.
I swear I watched it twice with one
Yeah,
friend
yeah.
and then once with them, and that was
Yeah.
like one. I had to answer that question.
I mean, props to Jonah. He created an iconic
Something
laugh.
distinguishable to the character.
Yeah.
that's
No,
not-
Ephraim laughs more like that's more his realistic laugh. But you know,
Regardless
Yeah.
of you being
Yeah.
people being
Yeah,
famous
yeah,
or
yeah.
not, I thought, but I
His
guess
laugh
now.
seems so
Yeah.
on purpose.
So
where it was like,
amazing.
Where do you
had
get
to have
that
told
from?
him.
Yeah,
And
right.
That's
that's
Jonah?
why Jonah's a great actor
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you guys
Hell
thought
yeah.
that, you know.
Hell
But
yeah.
no, he does not laugh like that.
Wow.
I would say that Jonah made him a lot more likable in the movie.
Okay.
You know, he's very charming in real life, but he's much more of an asshole than like Jonah portrayed him to be.
Jonah did some
Yeah.
fucked up shit to Miles
Yeah,
Teller.
but
in
like
the
they
movie.
still
Yeah.
they still toned him down, and they no, for real they toned him down.
Well,
because-
even one of the questions that we have, right, is the scene is the very beginning when they're going to buy weed and he takes the gun out of the trunk.
Okay,
Like,
yeah.
did that actually happen?
No.
Okay.
That
Because
never happened. No.
that's an insane scene.
most
One of
insane
those-
scene.
Besides, like
scene of all
riding
time.
through the Iraqi desert, which I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
we'll get into, like that
Yeah.
scene to open
Yeah.
the movie up. Basically, we're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
all right, we
Yeah.
know what this guy's about. This guy's
Right.
out of his mind.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
So Efraim was an asshole, but he wasn't like that. You know, like you fire a machine gun on the streets of Miami, you're gonna get arrested.
That's
you
what-
know,
yeah.
I mean, like that's
Yeah.
you know, he's not that dumb. But we did have machine guns in the trunk. That's true.
Okay.
So like because we were federal firearms license holders,
yeah.
so
Right.
so we had like Uzis and like AK-47s, and we'd go to the range and like everyone's popping off their pistols, and suddenly we go, and everyone else stops shooting, and everyone's like, who the fuck was that? You know? So yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to get back into the story. So
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
all right, we're talking the part of the movie that is probably the craziest part of the movie, one of the craziest true film scenes I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I want you to like tell us this whole, the whole story of like the idea you guys. The idea gets presented. You have to go to Jordan to start to make this deal happen. So
Right.
What happened actually?
What happened actually? Well, you might be a little disappointed that it's a true story, but it's actually didn't happen to us. So we never drove through the Triangle of Death.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we were not that dumb. However, the screenwriter, Stephen Chin, he was that dumb. So the guy who wrote the screenplay for War Dogs, that actually happened to him because he wanted to go to Iraq to write another screenplay. This is back in like 2004-ish. He wanted to write a screenplay about these other two guys who were in Iraq. He couldn't, like, he wanted to go there and meet them. He, of course, there were no commercial flights going into Iraq at the time, so he flew into Jordan and hired a Jordanian driver to drive him to Baghdad. The driver decided to stop in Fallujah because he can get free gas, and you know they got shot at by insurgents, and he got saved by the U.S. Army, and that whole thing actually happened to Stephen Chin.
Wow!
And so when he was writing the screenplay for War Dogs, Todd Phillips, the director, he's like, you know, these guys are just like sitting in the office all day. We need more action here. You know, put your story in there. You know, so the Beretta deal was real. We actually did have that deal, but we actually defaulted on that contract. We did not deliver it.
So you never went to Iraq, Jordan,
never went to Iraq.
nothing.
No.
Wow.
I've been to Jordan, but
Okay.
not to Iraq. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that picture never happened either.
No.
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 What are you thinking when in the movie throughout that scene? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm not that dumb.
Because that's insane. Yeah.
So what is more of the day to day like for you during this whole process if you really aren't in the field like doing these like?
I mean, most government contracting is in an office, and you're on the internet, you're sending emails, you're making phone calls. It's really a logistics job, really. I mean, most arms dealing gets glamorized because of what you're dealing in, but it's really just a product, and you're making connections, now because of the product and who you're buying it from, sometimes your connections are shady characters, and we dealt with plenty of shady characters, but the day-to-day is much more regular business than you would think.
Just brokering at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's just
right?
brokering.
It was the guy Henry. I forget his last name.
Henry.
He's a real person,
He's a real person.
And
so,
you actually did business with him?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So in the movie, his name is Henry Gerard. His real name is Henry Tomei, or Heinrich Tomei. We called him Henry. He's a Swiss guy. He looks actually a lot more clean cut than Bradley Cooper looked in the movie. Bradley Cooper looked rough, with the unshaven and the glasses and the bloodshot eyes. And Bradley did that on purpose. But
he did a great job.
He did. He's a great actor, but not accurate. The real guy looked more like a Swiss banker. Very clean cut.
That's interesting.
Yeah, no glasses, blonde hair. Like perfect suit, always clean shaven.
Shady, but he was shady.
So yes, but he was very professional, like he never, in the movie, Bradley is screaming, "Do your fucking job," he never raised his voice, never heard him scream ever.
Wow.
Was he actually on a watch list?
He was, so he wasn't exactly on a watch list. He was written about as a person of concern, by Amnesty International.
Okay.
Nothing had ever been proven against him.
Okay.
He was just suspected of doing a lot of things. He was suspected of supplying African warlords with weapons and things like that, but they could never prove it. So he was never placed on an official banned list. So it was legal for us to do business with him, and the government knew that we were doing business with him because one of the requirements they had was for us to tell us who we were buying from. So we submitted that to them. We submitted him as a source to them in advance of them giving us the contract. So they knew the entire time, and they did not complain.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I think probably go back and just get into, the day-to-day of transitioning from selling bed sheets to selling guns.
Right.
How did what's kind of going through your head? What's the average deal? Is the average ticket? What's the average price of a government contract?
Right. So government contracts vary the whole spectrum. I mean, there are contracts for $10,000 and for $10 billion. There's literally that range, and of course, the higher the value the contract, the harder it is to win, of course, and the more requirements there are. Right. So anything these days, it's anything under 250 grand. You can win as a brand new contractor with zero experience. They require no past performance. They call it past performance, which is proof that you've done this business in the past. Anything under 250K, usually it's just whoever's got the lowest price wins. Right. Wow. So that's how you start off. You start off just bidding on these smaller contracts. Now you could make depending on the contract, there's no legal requirement for profit margins or anything. It's whatever you think you can put on there and still win the contract. The average, I would say, would be 5% for really big contracts and 20% for small contracts. So you could make realistically, 25 to 50 grand on a $250,000 contract. Wow. Without any experience, right? And once you win a few of those, you qualify for the larger contracts, for the multi-million-dollar contracts.
Wow.
So when I first started working with Efraim, he already had a whole bunch of contracts going for munitions and for weapons, mostly to Iraq at the time. And the idea was that I would expand the business by working on other things. So I started working on fuel contracts. And the first contract I won was for 40,000 gallons of propane.
Okay.
And it was delivered to an Air Force base in Wyoming. And we were splitting the profits 50-50 for the stuff I worked on. So my end of the deal, I made $8,000 for about 2-3 weeks worth of work, which is not bad for a first.
Pretty good.
Pretty good for a first deal. Yeah. So I started working on some larger fuel contracts. I also worked on some food contracts, some clothing, vehicles, really random stuff. But then as he started winning more and more of his weapons and ammo stuff, he's like, look, I really need you to help me with this stuff. Like, so the first contract that I worked on that was guns related was for he had won this contract for rare gun parts that was going to the special forces. So special forces, they train on all these weapon systems, even if like outdated historical stuff, because when they're out there in bumblefuck in the field, they don't, they might come across something from World War II and they need to know how to use it.
Wow.
And so they trained them on all these historical weapon systems. And so they were in the market to buy all these things for training. And it was like, I forgot exactly, but it was like 130 different items. It was a massive quantity and all stuff that's very hard to find.
Right.
So he bid it. He kind of knew the general ballpark figures of what these things would cost. And then he put he doubled the price because he knew that very few people are going to be able to bid on this thing. So he just put it at a really high margin. He won the contract and he's like, look, I don't want to work on this stuff because this is going to take a massive amount of work, but there's a decent amount of money in here. Why don't you work on this? So that was the first like gun thing I worked on. And that took me like a good 2 months to deliver. And there's like 70,000 gun shops in America and I was trying to call them all. So it was a lot of work, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, but eventually, worked on that. So that was like my first gun related contract. And then I lost a whole bunch of things I worked on because that's just the nature of the game. Right. It's kind of like a casino. You don't know who you're bidding against. You don't know how competitive you are. They don't tell you that. They're legally not allowed to tell you what you're, even if you have any other competitors. Because if you know you have no competitors, you're going to put a massive price on it and then you're going to win. Yeah. So I lost a whole bunch of contracts and then after that, we started working on the Afghan contract. Wow. So I didn't really work on that many gun contracts before working on the massive contract.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
How long? How many? Was it a year before that started?
No, it was about like 8-9 months.
Wow.
From when I started until
just throwing you in there.
Wow. And then what would a profit margin be or percentage that you guys would get on a $300 million contract?
So we bid it at 9% profit margin, and the reason we did that is because Efraim assumed everyone else was doing 10.
Right. Yeah. Right.
He was debating before we submitted it whether he's like, maybe someone else is thinking the same thing and they're doing 9, so we should do 8. Right. But like each percent was like $3 million of profit, right. So he didn't want to like leave that much money on the table. So eventually we decided on 9. But after we won the contract, we renegotiated with all the suppliers and we got some better logistics options, and eventually we got the profit margin up to like about 20% average. Oh, wow. So we were going to make about $60 million from that.
Wow.
Yeah.
But so in the movie, they showed that you left $53 million on the table. Is that true?
That is true.
So that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, we didn't find out in the way they show in the movie because that's illegal for them to say that. Yeah. Right. That, in the movie they're like, well, we're not supposed to tell you this.
Fuck it. Yeah, that's what he says. He's like, fuck it, I'll tell you anyway.
Yeah, like in a room full of all his colleagues. It's not fuck it. We're not allowed to do this, but everyone here's a witness that I'm doing something illegal. No, that's not how it works. I was actually talking to one of the contracting officers on the phone, and we were having some trouble like getting overflight permits. So when you move military goods by aircraft, you need to get permission from every country that you fly over. It's called an overflight permit to move your military goods through their airspace. And a few of the countries were refusing to give us permits. God. And so we were getting delayed, and the Army was getting really upset because our Afghan allies who we were supposed to supply this ammo to were running out of ammo. And Afghanistan has a fighting season. They only fight in the spring and the summer because it's like tall mountains and the snow fills up the mountain passes. Wow. So they can't fight during the winter. And so it was springtime and fighting season started, and our Afghan allies were running out of ammo, and the army was like, you guys got to get this over here like immediately. And we told, well, we have all these problems with these overflight permits. And so I was talking to the contracting officer on the phone. He's like, don't worry, we're going to help you. I'll get, the embassies on the line. We're going to put some political pressure on these people, and the contracting officer tells me, he's like, because we really want you guys to succeed. We're really, you guys are just like so competitive, and we're like, really? We're really competitive? And he's like, oh yeah, you guys beat the next guys by a lot. And I'm like, how much? and he's like, listen, I'm not really allowed to tell you this, but just between me and you, this is on the phone, it was just me and this guy talking. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to get in trouble, but there are a few contracting officers involved in this contract, so it could be any of them. But anyway, I think the statute of limitations passed. Probably. So he tells me, he's like, I'm not really allowed to tell you this, but you guys came in 50, I think it was 52 million under the nearest competitors. And I told Efraim, like, he just told me that we beat the next guys by 50. He's like, what? Oh, fuck. We could have made another 50 mil. He was so pissed. He was so pissed. In reality, probably we couldn't have just beat the next guy by 2 million. They probably gave us the contract because we were so competitive. Right. So they overlooked some of our other deficiencies of, being in our early 20s.
And that's with the U.S. government, that contract?
Yeah. So the contract was with the U.S. Army specifically, and the U.S. Army was supplying it to the Afghan Army, who were our allies. Yeah, because they were training the Afghan allies, our Afghan allies. Yeah.
Have you guys dealt with any contracts of that size or close to that size before that?
Oh, this was like 25 times bigger than our next biggest contract.
In the movie, in the beginning, he's like, we take the crumbs and we just live off the crumbs. And I was having this conversation with them. One of the things I wanted to ask you, in hindsight, is like, do you regret jumping that big into a contract that was so big where you were making a couple $1 million, right? And then you jump into a $300 million contract and then having to supply that. Like, what is your mindset going into this with him, knowing that he's a little greedy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't regret winning the contract. I regret I regret messing it up. If we had delivered it, we could have easily delivered it successfully in retrospect if we had done just one thing different, which was ask the Army for permission to do the repackaging rather than doing it without their knowledge.
I wanted to ask you if that was real too, that you really had to do that.
Yeah, we did. And in retrospect, they probably would have given us permission to do it because it turned out that they knew the whole time and they didn't care. Only when the New York Times published their article, then they cared.
But how did the New York Times even find that out?
So we didn't pay the box guy.
Yeah,
that part's true. That's true.
Wow.
Yeah, so
he really called.
Yeah,
but he didn't call the government. He called the New York. He called the New York Times.
Yeah.
Yo, that's...
He called the government too.
I think he's like calling 911. I know he's in another country in the movie, but that's insane.
Wow. So you guys get the deal now. Are you going to Albania to help package and he's at Live and 11 partying?
First, do you actually inspect the bullets? Do you go over there?
So I didn't personally go. So this is one thing they changed in the movie. This ammo that was from Albania is 7.62 by 39 ammo. It's the ammo used in the AK-47. From a value perspective, it was actually a very small part of the contract. It was only worth about 10% of the contract. Most of the money was in the grenades and anti-aircraft rockets, mortar rounds, tank rounds. The larger caliber stuff's much more expensive. Right. And we were making way more money on that stuff. Our margins were better on that too. And we were buying from, I forgot how many, like 7-8 different countries at the time. And I was dealing with the U.S. Army in Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. That's where they're based. And so I was pretty much managing the whole contract. He was going after other contracts. He's like, David, you got this. We're really rocking and rolling. I'm gonna get us some other contracts. I'm like, maybe we should concentrate on this thing. And he's like, nah, you got this. So I was like managing the whole contract. Wow. And so when we realized that we needed to go inspect the ammo in Albania, he's like, David, I need you here. You're doing a great job managing the contract. You have to deal with with all these other countries and the government and blah blah blah. We can't send you to Albania. So I had one of my best friends, a guy named Alex. He had just finished a stint in the French military. He's a dual citizen. And he also had a degree in international relations. He speaks 3 languages, very smart, capable guy. And so I said, well, why don't, how about Alex? He's looking for a job right now. And he thought that was a great idea. And we sent Alex to inspect it. And when he gets to Albania, originally we were going to inspect it just because oil prices had skyrocketed at the time. It was early 2007. There was a big spike in oil prices, and 80% of the cost of air freight is like in the fuel. So we were actually underwater on this part of the contract. We were going to lose money on delivering this ammo. And so I had the idea to remove the wooden. So the way the ammunition was packed was that it's in these vacuum sealed metal tins they call them sardine cans. And those sardine cans are put into these heavy wooden crates. And the crates are then put onto the pallet. So I thought, well, we don't really need those wooden crates. We can just remove the sardine cans and pack those onto the pallet. And Efraim thought, that's a great idea. We'll save a bunch of weight on shipping. We need to find out what those crates weigh so we can calculate what our shipping costs are. And Efraim didn't trust the Albanians. He's like, we need to inspect this ourselves to make sure. And this is going to be a big problem to do the whole repackaging thing. So let's send somebody to manage it. And so that's how I had the idea to send Alex. So Alex goes over there, weighs the crates. Turns out they weighed a shit ton, and that just removing them would put us in the black on this contract. So that was great news. But he told me, he's like, but you do realize this is all Chinese, right? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh yeah, no, there's Chinese markings all over the boxes. I'm like, this is all Albanian. He's like, I don't know, man, this is Chinese. and I tell Efraim, and he's like, no, he's like, that's not. He's like, maybe Alex is an idiot. Have him send us some pictures so we could see ourselves. Big mistake, right? So he sends us some pictures, and it's obviously Chinese markings. And
why is that a mistake?
So because emails live forever.
Yeah.
And that's how they get you. You know, if you're ever doing anything illegal, don't send an email about it. Don't send a text message about it, because that stuff lives forever, and that's what they use in court to prove their case.
Wow.
So like we realized this was a problem because our contract specifically said no Chinese ammunition can be delivered directly or indirectly under this contract. And I mean, they said that because there's an arms embargo against China put in place in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And but the contract didn't say no ammunition that violates the embargo. It says no Chinese ammunition, period. Right? And this ammo in Albania was given to Albania by the Chinese in the 70s. So it didn't violate the terms of the embargo, but it did violate the terms of our contract. So we thought to ourselves, well, like maybe we should ask for a waiver from the Army. We'd be like, hey guys, you kind of wrote the contract a little too broad. Can you just change it to just refer to the embargo? Because that's what you guys are talking about, right? And then Efraim was like, yeah, but what if they say something like, General Dynamics was bidding on this contract and they were pissed that you guys won and they had to bid with all these restrictions against the Chinese. So it's not fair that we change it after you guys win this contract. So we're going to take this $300 million contract away from you and put it out for open bid. And you guys could bid on it correctly this time. So we're like, he's like, I don't want to lose a $300 million contract. So maybe let's just not tell them about it, And so that was the decision. We decided not to tell them and hire some Albanian guy to repackage the ammunition to hide that from them.
And what was the price of the packaging?
So we negotiated with the Albanian. So a guy named Costa owned like a cardboard box factory in Albania, and we negotiated with him $100,000 to do the whole. I think it was like 150 million rounds, something like that. And we were going to save about 3 million in air freight costs. So great deal for us.
That's accurate. The movie that's in the movie
that
too.
part's accurate.
That's cool.
They sent me like
I'm
the
sad
script.
I'm sad for you. I just heard, man,
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Because in hindsight, of course, it's easy to say now. You know what? Maybe we should have asked the government. They probably would have said yes because they needed this ammunition.
Yeah, they
you
really
know what I mean.
did,
But in
yeah.
hindsight, everything is 2020. So.
Everything's 2020. I mean, we didn't know it at the time, but they actually knew that it was Chinese. So the State Department actually told. So Alex met with the State Department when he was in Albania. And one of the guys from the State Department said, yeah, you know, this stuff is all like Chinese, but, you know, this is great because, so Albania was trying to join NATO at the time. Mm-hmm. And one of NATO's requirements is that they get rid of all their old Warsaw Pact ammunition, the stuff that they got when they were allied with the Soviet Union. And so, well, they actually pulled out of the Soviet Union and made an alliance with the Chinese, and that's how they got all the Chinese ammo. So they were going to have, Albania was going to have to pay to dismantle this ammo. And so they were thrilled to like sell it for like anything.
Yeah.
And that's why we got such a low price. And so the State Department, I mean, they're based in Albania. They know the history of Albania. And so the guy from the State Department knew about all the Chinese ammo. And he's like, oh, this is a win-win-win for everybody. You know, the Albanians don't have to pay to dismantle it. The Afghans get the ammo they need. And the United States gets a really good deal on ammo.
And
so this is perfect. Yeah. And we'll make a lot of money.
And did Henry broker this deal?
So Henry brokered the deal, yeah. So Henry was friends with the Albanian prime minister's son.
Oh, wow.
And so that's how he like put this whole thing together for us. Yeah.
And what's your relationship like with Efraim at this point? Because it seems like you guys are like, it's kind of okay. Are there any red flags that you're like, I'm in this shit too deep? You know, I'm seeing his true colors come out, or are you guys okay at this point?
Right. So, I mean, there are a few red flags. Well, you know, maybe more than a few, but the first big red flag is he tried to cut Henry out of the deal.
Oh, so that's real too.
Yeah, that's real. He tried. So the way that happened was once we started doing the repackaging and we started flying the ammo into Afghanistan on a regular basis, like 3-4 aircraft loads were going every week, 45 tons each. You know, the money was rolling in, and of course, Efraim could never leave well enough alone. Like he can't just like sit back and relax. He always has to make more. So he asked Costa, the guy who was doing the repackaging. He's like, hey, do you know anyone who works in the Albanian Ministry of Defense? And Costa's like, yeah, I actually have one of my cousins works there. Albania is a very small country, you know. Yeah. So he's like, could you ask your cousin, you know, if he could find out what the Albanian MOD is paying for our ammo? And Costa says, yeah, sure, I'll ask him. A few days later, he comes back and he says, my cousin told me that they're paying 2 cents a round. They're getting paid 2 cents a round. And we were paying Henry 4 cents a round. And Ephraim's like, that motherfucker, he's doubling his money. He's ripping us off so bad. And I'm like, Efraim, we're selling it to the army for 10.5 cents a round. Yeah. I mean, we were paying 5 cents a round in shipping costs, but still we were profiting a cent and a half, which is almost as much as Henry was making. Yeah. So I'm like, we're making money. He's like, yeah, but we're taking all the risk with the Chinese ammo. That motherfucker didn't tell us about the Chinese. You know, we gotta cut this cocksucker out. I'm gonna go to Albania. I'm cutting this fucker out. You know, and I'm like, Efraim, leave it alone. You know, everything's going good. This isn't even the biggest part of the contract. You know, the grenades are like making us so much more money. Just leave it alone. Everything's going good. The army's thrilled. Everything's going smooth. He's like, I don't care. It's all money, and we're gonna make more of it. You know, and so he decides to go to Albania to try to negotiate directly with the Albanians to cut Henry out of the deal. You know,
wow,
yeah. And before he goes, he tells me, he's like, David, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take all the quotes you got from all our other suppliers and change the prices on the quotes so it looks like we got much better quotes from them, and I'm going to show them these quotes, and I'll be like, if you guys don't give us a better price, I'm going to go with these other guys. So like I just used some basic PDF software and changed the numbers and printed it out, give it to him. He gets to Albania. Alex told me this because he was he was there with him, and he meets with Yili Pinari, the guy who's the head of the Albanian export company, and he shows him the documents I printed out. He's like, you got to give me better quotes. And Yili looks at it, he's like, don't show me your fake documents. He knew like right away. He's like, I know the industry. I know nobody can beat us on price. Come on, you know. And Efraim just hounds him like for like a couple of, he's like, you don't understand. If you don't give me a better price, this whole contract's going to fail. And I've got all these other contracts and all this other business we're going to do so much more business in the future. If you just give me a better price now, you're going to make so much more money later. He's giving him every excuse in the book. And eventually Yili says to him, he's like, look, I'll tell you what, I'll make a meeting with you and the guy who can make this decision. And he sets up this meeting, a guy named Mikhail Diliorgi, who we found out, we didn't know this at the time, but we found out later he was like the leader of the Albanian mob.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Alex told me, he went with Efraim to the meeting, that the meeting was in this like skyscraper that was under construction. They went inside the construction site, and then he like opened up like this door, and suddenly it's like a beautifully furnished Wall Street style like office.
Wow.
And at the head of the table is this really hard looking motherfucker, and Efraim is like a big talker. He's always like loud and getting in people's face. And Alex told me the second he stepped in this room, he shut the fuck up. He knew right away he couldn't like fuck with this guy. And he, and next to the mobster is the president of Albania's son.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, so he's trying to cut the son's best friend out of the deal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So Diliorgi, the mobster, says to Efraim, he's like, look, I'm not cutting Henry out of the deal. Okay. We have it set up like this for a reason. We're going to keep it like this. And we assume the reason is Henry's paying off the politicians, right?
Right.
Of course, we didn't know that, but
yeah,
it's a good assumption,
right?
Albania is notorious for corruption. So he's like, but I'll tell you what, if, I know that you're paying this other guy, Costa, to repackage the ammo. Why don't you give us the contract to repackage the ammo? We'll make some money on that. And then we can give you a little discount off the ammo because we'll be making more money. And Ephraim's like, oh, that's a great idea. That guy's fired. You're hired. Let's do this. So he flies back from Albania feeling very proud of himself. He saved a little bit of money. It wasn't like a big discount, but he saved a little bit. And Costa calls me up and he says, hey, I know you guys are changing packaging providers. I understand it's just business, no hard feelings. But I manufactured about $20,000 worth of boxes for this job, and I have nothing to do with these things unless without this job. So why don't you guys buy these boxes from me? You're gonna need them anyway. And so I told Efraim, why don't you pay this guy $20,000 for the boxes? And Ephraim's like, yeah, I'll do it, no problem. Like a week later, Costa calls me up and he's like, hey, I still haven't been paid for the boxes. What's going on? I'm like, oh, let me find out. Ask Efraim, like, what's going on with the boxes? And Ephraim's like, oh, I talked to the new packaging guys. They already got their boxes. They don't want to deal with them. Just ignore them. And I told him, well, why don't you just pay him $20,000 anyway? Because he knows everything, right? Yeah. So Ephraim's like, nah, what's he gonna do? He's a nobody. He's not gonna do anything. And I said, well, we have a $300 million contract. It's insurance. Pay the guy $20,000 just to keep him quiet. And Ephraim's like, nah, we don't need to do that. That's just, that's just money down the drain. I'm not doing that.
Crazy, man.
And he's like, just fuck that guy. Forget about him. And but at this point, so all the money that I had made from all the previous contracts, it had kept on getting rolled into the next contract. Because like when I won the first contract, we were about to win like another one. And Efraim says, oh, we're going to need money to finance this next contract. And I'm using my money to finance this contract. It's only fair you use your money. You just made a bunch of money on this contract. So we're just going to roll that into the next contract. So I wasn't pulling any money out of this. Right. The entire year and a half that we'd been working together at this point. And I'd been living off my $100K in savings, which was rapidly dwindling. Yeah. So I didn't really have, money to pay, to cover this guy.
You just want to compound it into the next deal.
And so I was like, I told him, like, Efraim, I think this is a really bad idea. This guy's going to be our enemy, and he knows a lot of shit that we don't want people to find out. Yeah. And he's like, you're too worried. You're too worried. Don't worry about it. Wow. And so turned out we should have worried about it. Yeah, of course. Because he called up the New York Times, and he told them about what we were doing, and he called up, I think it was the FBI, who I think transferred it to Customs Enforcement to do the investigation, and told them what we were doing about what we were doing. And his biggest mistake was that he called up the Albanian press and told them that the Albanian politicians were getting kickbacks from this deal. And about a week after the Albanian press published that article, Costa winds up dead. They found him face down in like a field, in like a dirt road, and somehow he'd been run over by his own car.
Wow.
And the Albanian authorities ruled it as an accident.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Nobody thought it was an
But
accident.
how did all that come to light? Did it come to light like in the elevator scene in the movie? Like, is it similar to how you guys got arrested? Like, did this article come out before you guys got arrested?
So the Albanian article came out before. Okay. But that was really mostly focused on Albania.
Yeah.
And then I think about shortly after that, Efraim pretty much informed me that he didn't want to pay me what we agreed upon. He was like, a lot of the guys around, we had like 15 employees in the office at that time. And he comes into my office and he's like, oh, a lot of the guys around the office are saying that, you're not pulling your weight around here anymore. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because at this point, like the contract was going smooth, like everything, the new, so Diliorgi, the mobster, he got the Albanian army to do the repackaging. I imagine he didn't pay them anything, but the army was actually pretty good. They were very organized and very, very competent. So they were doing the repackaging even better than Costa was doing it. So it was a good deal, really, for us, other than Costa ruining the whole thing. Yeah. But if we had paid him, it would have been great. And so the army was repackaging it, and we were flying 3-4 aircraft loads into Afghanistan every week. And I was like, for the first time in like many months, there wasn't like a huge crisis. And I went from like working 18-hour days like for months on end, and all I had to do now was kind of manage it, make sure that the planes landed on time, everyone got their documents, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I could do all that in just a few hours in the day. And so I was like starting to relax a little, starting to go back to the gym and, to just chill a little. And spending less time in the office. And so he goes to me, he's like, yeah, a lot of the guys are saying that, you're not pulling your weight around here. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Contract's going smooth. What's the problem? And he's like, yeah, I know the Afghan contract's going smooth, but we're really struggling on the Iraq contracts, and you're not helping. I'm like, well, you want to give me a piece of the Iraq contracts? I'll help on that. And he's like, oh, don't be crazy. I mean, you didn't help us win those contracts. Why should I give you a piece on it? I'm like, then why should I help you with it? Yeah. And, I'm not one of your employees. I'm not getting paid a salary. I work on a commission basis. And he's like, well, if if those Iraq contracts go down, our entire company could go down, and that takes your Afghan contract with it. So I say to him, well, in that case, you want to give me a piece of the company? And he says to me, he's like, well, David, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I own 100% of AUI Inc., and I always intended to keep it that way. But because I think that you have been a big source of our current success, I'm going to make you an offer I wouldn't make to anyone else. I'm going to give you a very generous $100,000 a year salary as my vice president and 1% of AUI. And I said to him, well, I appreciate that, but I'm supposed to get 25% of the Afghan contract, and that's going to make us 90% of all the money the whole company is going to make. And, I'm set to make $15 million from that. So your $100,000 a year salary isn't really much. So I think I'll stick with the deal I have. I'd rather make 15 million.
Yeah, right.
And he says to me, he's like, well, how about 0? Because that's the only offer on the table.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I said to him, well, in that case, go fuck yourself and I'll see you in court. And I walked out, and that was my last day working at AEY.
Wow. So the investor, and I forget his name, is that real? Yeah. And was he actually wearing a wire at any point during this time?
No, that was not true.
Okay.
So the way actually it's kind of funny that the investor Ralph, who was not Jewish, by the way they show him in the movie, he was actually Mormon. His name was Ralph. They changed his last name, but he was a Mormon, and he owned a machine gun factory. He was not a laundromat owner. Yeah. But they kept his first name anyway. So he's actually the only one who ended up taking it to trial. So he was actually the only one who pled innocent out of all of us.
Oh wow.
So about like 2 months after I left AEY, I get a call from one of the secretaries at the office, and she tells me, she's like, David, I just want you to know that the feds just raided the office. Oh man. And so I call up Alex, because he's like one of my best friends, and he was still working in Albania.
About to say, is he back home? He's in Albania.
No, he's still in Albania. And I tell Alex, I'm like, hey Alex, I just want to let you know, the feds just raided the office. And he's like, what? Why? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe about the Chinese stuff. And he's like, but that's not like illegal. I mean, this is just a breach of contract. It should be a commercial thing. It's like a breach of commercial contract. It doesn't even violate the embargo. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm just telling you, I don't know what they're there for, but I assume that's what it is. Maybe it's something else. And he says, okay, let me try to find out. He calls up Danny, who's the guy that Efraim replaced me with once I left. He eventually fucks Danny over too. And the guy he replaced Danny with, that's just how we did business. He just fucks everybody over. And so Alex calls up Danny, and he says to Danny, I need this document. I've got an aircraft landing this afternoon. I need this document to do the export license, knowing that all the feds had kicked everyone out of the office so that they could take their computers and box up the files. So he hears Danny cover the mouthpiece on his phone and whisper to Efraim, hey, it's Alex. He says he needs this document. What should I tell him? And Efraim goes, oh shit, that document's in the office. We can't get to it now. Tell him there was a bomb threat. Yeah. Tell him there was a bomb threat. That's why we can't get to the office, but we'll get it to him in a few hours. All right. So Danny gets back on the phone. Oh, there was a bomb threat. We have to get that in a few hours. And Alex is thinking, why are these guys lying to me? Maybe Ephraim's going to try to pin everything on me. He's going to say, oh, I had no idea. Alex was trying to keep his cushy job in Albania, and he was doing all this repackaging stuff without my knowledge. And so Alex says, I'm not going down for this fuck. He was just getting a salary. He wasn't making a commission or anything. And so he's on the next flight back home. And both of us contact defense attorneys, and the defense attorney says to us, well, why don't you look in your emails and see what kind of evidence there is against you, right? So we both put in Chinese ammunition, repackaging, and there was a lot. There was a lot of evidence. At first, Efraim, when we first made the decision, Efraim was like, we're not talking about this in writing. Everything has to be over the phone. But then at some point, I think it was Ralph who sent an email to us with directions of how to sand off Chinese markings off wooden crates with a step-by-step with pictures. He had literally tried this on wooden crates himself with Chinese printing on them and with a sander. He sent us, this is how you get rid of Chinese markings. I don't know why he had to be so fucking blatant, but it was just super obvious. Yeah. And then, once the cat was out of the bag, everyone was make sure you remove the Chinese documents from the tins when you're doing the repackaging. And there was many emails that were just made it the evidence.
You incriminated yourselves.
It just put the government in a bad position too, because they knew it was a Chinese ammo, but what do we do now? We're not supposed to be doing this,
right? Yeah. So and we knew that we were the lawyer looked at this and he's like, yeah, you guys, you're gonna lose if you take this to court. I mean, maybe you can get it thrown out on technicality, no guarantee of that. But I mean, if you fight them in court, you're gonna need $200,000-300,000. Do you have that? And no, we don't have that. Before he asked me that, he's like, I'm gonna ask you a question, and it's kind of a serious question. How much justice can you afford? That's what my lawyer said to me.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I'm I was almost about to go broke because I hadn't been pulling any money out at this point.
And did Efraim have money?
Oh, Efraim had a lot of money, and he fought them for a while until he realized he was going to lose, and eventually he pled guilty. Yeah. Also, so Alex and I both pled guilty immediately, and Efraim eventually did too.
How do you guys? How does the scene happen in reality of getting arrested? Is it at the penthouse or in the elevator, or
did you have a Miami penthouse?
It's not a penthouse, but we both lived in the same building. That part is true. But we both, so the building, the apartment they show in the movie, that building hadn't even been built by the time that when this story happened. We both lived in, for people who know Miami, the Flamingo Complex in South Beach. It's somewhat of a famous building. Back then it was, I've heard that these days it's a lot more like family friendly. Back then it was much more like party oriented. Gotcha. Like all of Miami's influencers and like strippers and all that. They all live there, I think it's been so long they all grew up, and now they have families, so now it's like more family.
That's funny.
Yeah. So where did you get arrested?
So we actually did a self-surrender. So we didn't get arrested. We just turned ourselves in. We just turned ourselves in. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because it was like a whole negotiation before that happened.
Yeah, so you knew it was.
Yeah. It wasn't like a surprise or anything.
But what again, it's more so like what you said, a breach of contract.
Yes.
Not in your head, in my head, not criminal.
Right.
What happens to make it criminal?
So good question. So they did the feds raided the office in August of 2007, and then we didn't hear from them for another 6 months. They just disappeared. Right. And we thought, well, maybe they're just not going to go after this. Maybe they realized, hey, this isn't, our case is weak, or, they wanted the army. It turned out later. So when Ralph went to trial, during the trial process, you do a whole bunch of discovery, right? Where you get to request the evidence and like the government's internal emails to each other and stuff like that. So we saw a whole bunch of emails that the government sent each other. And one of the emails that came out in trial was the Justice Department sent an email to the Army informing them that this stuff is Chinese and that maybe they should stop taking delivery on it. The Army sent an email back to them saying, this ammunition is critical to the mission in Afghanistan. If you guys want us to stop taking delivery on it, we're going to need a letter from the Attorney General of the United States instructing us to do that. And that letter never came. So the Army kept on taking delivery on it for another 6 months, 3-4 aircraft a week of Chinese ammunition, which they absolutely knew was Chinese ammunition, and they kept on paying Efraim for it with every aircraft load. And so by the time, and everything was going great, nothing, they seemed like they were thrilled. And then February of 2008, no, it was March 2008, the New York Times finally publishes their article. And it's a front page article. Our mugshots are on the front page next to rusty looking ammo. And they said, they're delivering defective ammunition and putting our allies in danger. And the ammunition they had on the front page wasn't even the Chinese ammo. It was Bulgarian ammo that Efraim had bought sight unseen because he had found this really good deal in Bulgaria. It was a tiny amount. It was like 30,000 rounds out of 150 million, so it was like a tiny amount. But he had been offered this ammo for very, very low price, even lower than the Albanian. I think it was 1 cent a round or something that they offered it to him at. And it was such a small amount at such a low price that it wasn't even worth going there to inspect it. And we already had extra room on the aircraft because we were delivering grenades out of Bulgaria. So Efraim decided, you know what? I'm just going to roll the dice on this. The price is so low. If they accept the delivery and the quality is good, they accept delivery, we'll make a massive profit margin. If they don't accept it, it's not such a big loss, because it's so cheap. Right. Of course, it turned out to be utter garbage. Yeah. And the Army took one look at it and they're like, we're not paying for this crap. And they rejected it and they didn't pay. But they weren't going to pay to ship it back. And they have no ammunition recycling facilities in Afghanistan. So they just shoved it to the side of the airport and just left it there. Mm-hmm. And it just sat there in the rain and the wind and the sun and just kept on corroding for another few months. And at that point, the New York Times sent their reporter asking around for the stuff that AEY had delivered. Someone pointed the reporter at that stuff. He got a bunch of pictures of that. And that's what ends up on the front page in the New York Times. And the way they wrote the article implied that all the stuff we delivered was that quality,
Wow.
which was not true. I mean, the Army was by and large very happy with the quality.
Yeah.
So
the media is really the devil, bro.
Well, because brother, they're trying to sell. I mean, that's like you guys were selling guns and ammunition. They're selling
papers.
Selling stories.
The more scandalous it is, the more papers they sell. Of course.
And that's where the criminality came into.
So what happened, as soon as the New York Times article got published, 2 days later, the Army issued a statement saying, we had no idea any of this was happening. We're shocked and appalled. We're canceling AEY's contract. And like a few days after that, the Justice Department announced that they were charging us with fraud.
What?
And the way they put it was, they said, you guys delivered 71 aircraft loads of this Chinese ammo. And in each aircraft, you supplied a document. And the document is called a Certificate of Conformance, or a COC, right? And each document, each COC that goes with the aircraft, it has the type of ammunition, the quantity, the year it was manufactured, and most importantly, the place of origin. And you guys put place of origin Albania, and you knew that it was China. And not only did you know it was China, but you had a whole operation to hide that it was China. So each submission of this document of knowingly false information is an act of fraud. And you did this 71 times. And you can get 5 years for each act of fraud.
Oh my God.
So you're looking at 355 years in prison.
Oh my God.
Unless you plead guilty. If you plead guilty, as prosecutors, we have the power to combine 71 acts into one act. We'll charge it as a single act of fraud, but only if you plead guilty. And then you get maximum 5 years. And because you plead guilty, you get credit for that. We'll tell the judge you're a reformed individual and a good citizen, and you feel really bad about this. And so we'll recommend the judge to give you on the lower end of the guidelines. Up to the judge. We have no power over the judge, but but they usually listen to the prosecutors in the case. So, maybe you'll get a year, maybe just probation, So what do you want to do? The rest of your life in prison, or maybe just probation? So of course, we pled guilty. Alex, me, and Efraim all pled guilty. Efraim took him a few months to realize he was going to lose, but eventually he pled guilty. Ralph decided to take it all the way to trial.
Wow.
The first trial that he did, he had to go through 2 trials because the first trial was a hung jury. One juror refused to convict him. And the second trial, he got convicted. He ended up getting sentenced to 4 years in prison. Not 355 years,
wow.
but 4 years is no joke. He's like in his 70s at this point. So Ralph also invested like $1.5 million of his own money into the contract. And Efraim not only didn't give him the profits from the contract, he never even gave him his money back.
Wow.
So he stole $1.5 million from Ralph. Ralph went completely bankrupt because of that, and because Efraim stole his money, and also he used the rest of his money on his legal defense. So it ended up really bad for Ralph. Efraim probably would have gotten like on the low end of the 5 years because he pled guilty, but part of the plea agreement is that you could commit no more crimes while awaiting sentencing, and they didn't want to sentence us until Ralph's trial was over because they wanted to use that as leverage against us in case they wanted to call us as witnesses in his trial. And so so it was like 3 years between when they charged us and when they finally sentenced us. So during that time, Efraim just couldn't stay out of the business. They told him, you can't be in the arms business. So what he did was he had his latest lackey, the newest guy, start a company under his name, and he started doing business under that company's name. And but of course, he's such a control freak. He couldn't, like, when it got time to like negotiate stuff, he'd grab the phone away and start talking to himself. And he was doing this deal with like this guy from the Orlando area. And the guy realized who he was after like a whole bunch of conversations, and Googled him, realized he's already a convicted felon. And he, figured, hey, this guy might be trying to entrap me into something to get some time off for himself. And so the gun dealer that he's trying to do this deal with calls up the ATF, right, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Administration, and says, hey, I've got this convicted felon trying to do an arms deal with me. What should I do? And they say, why don't you introduce one of our undercover agents as your business partner to him?
Oh, man.
So he does that. The undercover agent tells Efraim, I'm the kind of guy who like needs to look you in the eye and shake your hand before I do a deal. So why don't you like come up to Orlando and we could close this thing? And Ephraim's like, yeah, that's how real men do business. That's what we're gonna do. I'll be up there next weekend, right? So he goes up to Orlando. And the undercover agent knew that part of his bond is he's not allowed to leave the Southern District of Florida. So but of course that doesn't bother Efraim. He drives right up to Orlando. Undercover agent meets with him, pops open the hood, the trunk of his car. He's like, hey, check out that gun I've got here. It's the latest HK on the market, knowing Ephraim's a gun nut. Efraim picks up the gun and he's like, what can I say? Once a gun runner, always a gun runner. Let's go pop off some rounds at the range. And the agent slaps cuffs on him. He's like, you're a felon in possession of a firearm.
Wow.
You can get up to 10 years in prison for that.
Oh,
it's illegal for a felon to even pick up a gun.
Or to be around it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
how much time did they wind up giving him?
So he
Isn't it funny how they get you though? How much goes
they knew what they were doing
so,
on that.
So I mean, he knew exactly what because it's illegal for you to hand a felon a gun too. So he said, "Look at the gun in my trunk."
Wow.
And Efraim just fell right into it, picked it up. Yeah.
Is there any communication with you and Efraim during the trial? Are you guys in court together and you're looking at him like giving him the middle finger or something? Like,
I woulda. No. Our lawyers and the federal agents said that we couldn't talk to each other. Yeah. They're like, you guys cannot communicate because then it'll look like you're collaborating, and So they did not want us to, and I had no desire to talk.
Right, of course.
At that point,
He got arrested, and because he violated the terms of his bond, they didn't give him a new one. Right, so he had to spend a year in county jail, just no picnic. And so he could have gotten 5 years for the fraud charge because that was the max, and 10 years for the gun charge, 15 years max. But he hired the best lawyers in Miami, paid him like millions of dollars, and my millions he paid him. And he negotiated down to 4 years, ended up getting out in about 3.5.
Wow.
Yeah. And I got sentenced to 7 months of house arrest. So I managed to avoid prison.
What are you
extremely grateful?
What are you? Are you feeling? Are you scared?
I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. It's keeping me up at night.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I'm
looking. You're probably using some. Well, you didn't go to trial, so you're obviously not paying for a great lawyer. And
no, I did not have much money. Yeah. So I was. So even pleading guilty cost me $30,000 just to plead guilty. Right, you have to, because otherwise, if you don't use a lawyer, they can write the plea agreement in a way that they fuck you over, and they, so you have to have a lawyer to protect you even when you're pleading guilty, and that cost me $30,000, and that was the last of my money. So by the time I was done paying my lawyer, I was completely broke. Damn.
But when you're on house arrest for 7 months, now what's your mindset number one, and number two, what are you doing for money?
Right. So I went back to doing massage therapy.
Okay, so yeah. I mean, that's what happened in the movie. That's really why I wanted to see how true that was in the movie.
Yeah.
That's
back
hilarious.
to the roots.
Yeah.
Oh
it's true. That's true. I didn't get a suitcase of cash from Henry.
So that was my next question.
Unfortunately not. I wish that was true, but that did not happen.
Okay.
No, Henry would not. He had no reason to give me a suitcase of cash, and he did not give me a suitcase.
You got
of cash.
so fucked.
Yeah.
Wait, and then we didn't even get in.
Yeah.
Did you have a wife during this whole time?
Yeah.
So what happened with her throughout? I know we probably should have dove in there throughout
some point,
but let's summarize that. What's the relationship like with your wife? During this whole process, and then up until the getting convicted.
So my daughter, I had a daughter born just 2 weeks after we won the contract. So I found out that my girlfriend at the time was pregnant right when we were starting to work on the Afghan contract.
Wow.
And so that was huge amount of pressure on me. I'm like, I gotta fucking win this thing. I'm like, I gotta win. I've got a kid on the way. I've got to start making money here. So that was, I think, a big motivator for me to work really hard on that and win it. And so my daughter was born just 2 weeks after we won the Afghan contract. And it was an enormous factor in my life because by the time I was living off my savings and had to support a kid, and And so, yeah, it was really horrible.
And are you hiding it from her? Does she know?
No. So yeah, in the movie they like have this whole drama that she knew the entire time.
Okay.
She knew before the Afghan contract what I was doing.
Okay.
Yeah, she was like actually I remember like shortly after she told me she was pregnant, I was scheduled to go to a trade show. I think it was in Abu Dhabi. And for like a defense exhibition trade show, and she tells me, she's like, "Go sell some guns." Yeah. No, she was totally supportive of the business I was in. She was much more concerned that I would be successful than whatever I was selling. They did that in the movie to create relationship drama,
of course,
because they know that the ladies love relationship drama, right? So and this is like Guns tends to be more of a guy focused movie, so they need to give something to the ladies in the audience, the girlfriends that the guys are dragging to the movie, so that's when you make a Hollywood movie, you have to appeal to like the center of the bell curve, right? So you have to appeal to most people because it's a big budget, so you need to have the biggest likelihood that you're going to make that money back, right? So they have all their movie demographics, and they try to have like a little bit for everybody so that they appeal to the widest audience. Yeah. So that's why they put that in there. Yeah.
Very well written movie. Now hearing the real story and knowing like what was real and what was kind of like exasperated a little bit. Very well written.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. I thought they did a good job.
Yeah. How much did the movie make in the box office?
I think it made a bit over 80 million in the box office.
Wow. And then just now, how do you know what it's made up until this point?
I don't know, actually. I don't know what it's made streaming. I know that I think it's become a lot more successful in streaming than it was in the box office. It's become more of a cult hit.
Right.
So I know it's been on like Netflix top 10 several times. Like when it first got released on Netflix, I think it was like number 3. And a few months ago, I went on a Fox News interview, and like right after the Fox News interview, it got back up to like number 7.
I'm sure.
So I guess people saw the interview like, oh, I should watch War Dogs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
How much did you make from War Dogs?
How much money did I make from it?
Well, you were in it, right?
Oh yeah. So That's good. Yeah. So I have 3 seconds of fame.
I was like, is he fucking singing?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so. That should give you a percentage of the movie, bro.
Well, I was supposed to get 2% of the net, but of course, everyone who knows Hollywood knows that the net is always 0. So I knew that going in. I wasn't really expecting to get anything from that. But the actors always get a percentage on the gross,
Yeah. The movie wasn't.
I'm not a Hollywood
The movie
insider.
wasn't profitable.
Oh no, it was officially it wasn't profitable. No movies are officially profitable.
Really?
Even Gone with the Wind, which is one of the most successful movies of all time, is still losing money somehow.
But
they call it Hollywood accounting.
I thought if the budget,
the budget
is $100 million and then it makes $1 billion, how's it not profitable?
So there are some movies that they can't avoid. Right, claiming
so big.
Yeah, that's so big. If it's such a huge success, they can't avoid claiming profits on it.
Right.
But War Dogs cost $40 million to make, and it made $80 million in the box office. And I'm sure they claimed lots in marketing and blah blah blah. And,
wow.
So I was supposed to get net. Something. I'll tell you, I never got a check for any of the net.
But it's interesting that you said that actors get the gross.
Yeah, they always get the gross. They always get it. Miles Teller made a lot more money pretending to be me than I did being me.
It's crazy.
These guys are getting fucked everywhere. What the fuck is going on?
Yeah. It's okay. I got a Hollywood movie made about me. I'm not complaining
What's your life day to day like now?
So I took quite a right turn after that. So the house arrest actually was an enormous blessing for me, because while I was under house arrest, I'm a musician. That's what in the movie I'm playing guitar. I've written songs, I've published songs. I'm a singer, and I wanted to do one of my own personal songs. They're like, no, you're playing this song, or we're gonna get someone else to do the scene. Because I'm playing in the movie. I'm playing "Don't Fear the Reaper" to like a room full of 90-year-olds. So that's like the joke, So yeah, that's great. So they wanted to do that joke. So yeah, some of the old people in the audience did not find it amusing. Yeah, like so they're like came by. They're like, I know that song and it's not funny. But other people thought it was hilarious. They're like, oh, I get it. There were a whole range of reactions from the crowd when I did that scene. Yeah. But so while I was under house arrest, I was playing a lot of guitar, and I was bored, and but I really missed playing with the drummer because no drummer's gonna. I couldn't go to a studio, and no drummer's gonna bring his whole drum set over to my house. So I bought a drum machine, which is like an electronic tabletop device. You can make beats on it with all the buttons, and it plays it in a loop, and then you could play your guitar to the drums. But every time you want the drums to change, like when you're going from verse to chorus, I had to stop playing my guitar and press a button on the machine to change the drums, and interrupted the flow of the music. And I thought, man, this kind of sucks. I wish the drum machine was like in a pedal format on the floor so I could just tap on it with my foot, not have to stop playing my guitar. Went online to I was sure someone made something like this. I went online to try to buy something like that, and I couldn't find anything. And so I asked my musician friends, do you ever see like anything like this? And they're like, no, but if you find it, let me know. That sounds super cool. I want one too. So I thought, well, if everyone wants it, nobody's making it, I'm going to fucking make this thing. Wow. And so it took me about 3 years, but eventually I made it. It's called the BeatBuddy. Check it out.
Amazing.
Like your buddy that plays the beat.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that was it became a massive hit. Won a whole bunch of industry awards. I've sold many millions of dollars worth of it.
Nice.
And that was that's how I founded my company, Singular Sound, since then we've come out with like 6 other products, all done very well. Wow. So I've made a whole bunch of musical products, and that was my entrance into like inventing things. Mm-hmm. And I invented all these musical products, and since then I've expanded beyond music. I created a product with my brother called InstaFloss. That's it flosses all your teeth for you in 10 seconds. Uses it's like an advanced water pick. It uses 12 water jets. You just slide it across your teeth, and it gives you a perfect, comfortable, effective floss in just 10 seconds.
Wow, that's amazing.
Instafloss.com. Check it out.
Isn't it crazy how life works, bro? It's crazy. Even those little, like, you're right. Like, if imagine you paid the box guy. Where would it be right now?
I might be an arms dealer.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Or with that guy arrested.
More likely.
Right.
Probably would have gone down for something.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting to read in the newspapers that he's been arrested, like for something new. Because like I know people who know him, and they say he's still the same guy.
Yeah. What is he doing? He's still doing the same shit?
He's living in Miami. He lives in Miami. And from what I've heard from people, I know that he's still screwing people over, because every once in a while I get a phone call from somebody. Oh, I made the big mistake of going into business with this guy. I have to get into a lawsuit. You have any advice for me in dealing with him? I've heard that several times over the years. So he's still up to his old shenanigans. So that's why I'm like, look, I hope he changes, and I wish him the best. You know, like I don't like him. Obviously, he owes me $5 million. I'd forgive him if he paid me back, right? But with interest. But it's been quite a bit of interest at this point.
Not for nothing. It's been like fucking 15 years more than that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So look, if he has a moral awakening of some sort and says, "Hey, David, I know I screwed you over. Here's a check for $5 million. Can we be friends again?" I'd be like, "Bro, we're friends." Like I don't hate him that much. But he's never gonna do that.
Efraim, if you see this, my man, you know what to do.
Imagine we broker you guys back together. Shout out to the Journey podcast. 10%.
I would be happy to pay.
That's amazing.
But I'm not holding my breath.
Right.
So overall, looking back on this entire story and journey, like, what is your perspective? Is there regret? Are you grateful for it? Is it like where's your head at with everything?
Right
now that you're years removed from it and you have your own thing going on now, like how do you view it?
Look, you always think to yourself, well, what if I did this or that, right? But you don't know what would have happened if you had done that or that, right? Sure, if we paid the box guy, maybe we would have gotten away with it. If I had actually gotten a fucking rock solid contract notarized by my lawyers, maybe I could have forced him to pay me what he owed me, maybe, you know? But I don't know that would have happened. It could have, something else even worse could have happened. Right. I probably would have never gotten a movie made about me, you know, and that's pretty cool, right? So even though I made zero money from arms dealing in the end, I got a fucking movie, and that's pretty cool, right? Not many people can say that. Yeah. Not, especially people who are alive, you know, most movies that are made about people, it's made after they're dead, or even if they're alive, it's, you know, they're in prison and they're the bad guy in the movie. So the fact that I have a movie that portrays me relatively sympathetically, very rare. It's a good point. You know, it's a good point. And actually, the movie was the launch of my latest business, which is I'll tell you how this one happened. So ever since the movie came out, I've had a lot of people, like hundreds and hundreds of people, contact me like on Instagram, you know, please teach me how to do government contracting. I'm desperate. I'm broke, just like you were in the movie. I got to support my family. You know, I'll give you 90% of the business. Just teach, you know, like just be my mentor, you know, like I get like literally hundreds, like several every week. Wow. And, you know, I feel bad for these people and I want to help them, but like, first of all, I don't have time to help them. You know, like I'm running several businesses, and I've been banned from doing government contracting for 15 years. That was part of my sentence. So I'm a little out of date, right? And I recently got off the banned list, actually, like a year ago. Nice. So yeah, but then about a year ago, I got an email from somebody, from a guy named Logan, and he wrote me, he's like, hey, I just want you to know that about 6 years ago, my partner James and I, we were dead broke. We were working on a produce farm in Australia picking bananas, right? Just to make some money. And because they're American, but they were like traveling through Thailand. They ran out of money. They heard that Australia pays decently for agricultural workers, so they went there to make some more money so they can continue traveling. They saw the farm had a movie night. And the movie they showed was War Dogs. And they thought to themselves, man, these guys are like our age. They were like 21 years old at the time. If they can do it, why can't we do it? And they got obsessed with government contracting, and they taught themselves how to do government contracting. They bid on a bunch of contracts. They got lucky and won like a little laundry contract. Started making like laundry services for like a army base, and they started bidding on bigger and bigger laundry contracts. And 6 years later, they have a multi-million-dollar government contracting business. Wow. They're flying all over the world, going to like Germany to like, you know, manage they do the laundry for the Ramstein Air Force Base there, you know. So it's like they're very successful now. And they emailed me just saying, hey, just wanted to let you know if it wasn't for War Dogs, we would have never done this. Wow. And so, you know, thank you for the inspiration. And I thought to myself, these guys are currently doing government contracts, right? They have multi-million-dollar active contracts. They're bidding on new contracts. They're as up to date on this stuff as it can be. I've got hundreds of people asking me to teach them. So I said to them, why don't we start something where we teach people how to do government contracting? So that's how we started War Dogs Academy. Wow, that's amazing. Wow. That's amazing. And so go to warddogsacademy.com. And
I'm going.
And we built it. Awesome. We just launched like 3 months ago and so far we've had 25 students win their first federal contracts. Wow. Some of them in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Wow. So, and these are people who didn't know anything about government contracting. They started from zero, and we built it in a way. We did it in like easy to digest modules because it's pretty complicated and it's kind of hard to teach yourself. That's the truth. And that's why so many people contacted me, because it's so difficult to learn. It's very like nitty gritty, very technical, but not impossible to learn. I mean, so we broke it down into different modules. We also have a community, like a forum where all our students can network and ask each other questions. And we hired a retired contracting officer, a lady named Anna. She worked for the government for 10 years. She was a contracting officer, the one in charge, like awarding contracts. So she works for us now, and she is in the community helping students whenever they have any questions about anything. She reviews their proposals before they send it into the government to make sure they didn't miss anything. So they have a much higher rate of success because they have all this guidance. Wow. So and one of the things that we're really excited about is we have a financing arm of War Dogs Academy. So one big challenge for government contractors is that you have to pay. Let's say you're supplying something to the government. Most suppliers will ask you to pay before they ship, right? They're not going to give you credit. The government only pays you 30 days after you deliver.
Damn.
So you need the money to float that gap, right? And if you don't have the money, and that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if you win the contract, you're going to fail, right? So, but from an investor's perspective, it's actually a very good investment because the government always pays its bills. They don't run out of money. They're never going to go bankrupt. They print the money, right? And they have no incentive to screw you because they're not going to make any more money personally. They're just doing their jobs. They're just covering their asses. So as long as you do your contract correctly, 100% of the time you're going to get paid. So from an investor's perspective, it's a very good investment. Wow. So we have a network of investors that invest in our students' contracts as well.
What I got out of this is that everything happens for a reason. Because it looks like you're doing what you love to do every day, even though you went through all that stress. And obviously it was insane, but it looks like you're doing from the musician standpoint and even from that standpoint. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that, guys. Appreciate that.
I don't really have much else to say to you.
Just an amazing story.
Thank you.
Super inspiring, especially, bro. It's nuts.
It's very cool to hear the truth. You know, there's not many opportunities. I'm very grateful for this because there's not many very moments where you watch a movie and then you wonder all the time based on a true film where you wonder did that really happen? Did this? So it's just very cool, very surreal to be able to hear it from the guy who actually fucking did it.
It was surreal for me as well.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, thank you, brother. I'm joining the War Dogs Academy.
My pleasure.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Do
awesome.
it.